Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to provide this update on EOTs in the UK, Ireland, and Australia. Let me start by commenting on the phenomenal success of employee ownership trusts, or EOTs, in the UK. EOTs were introduced in 2014 following the Nuttall Review of Employee Ownership. And this form of trust ownership is the main reason why employee ownership has expanded by over 70% in the UK since 2014. Over 300 companies have become employee controlled using this trust mechanism, with 90 of these new EOTs created last year, showing that it's an increasing in popularity. In addition, there are 36 or so pre-existing trusts that are deemed EOTs under the relevant legislation. The move of a number of very well-known businesses has maintained momentum, and for example, the transition of a well-known large firm of architects, AHNM, has helped establish the EOT as a mainstream business model for architects' practices. It's important to remember that there's no ambiguity with the UK EOT. It is designed to support employee ownership. A new EOT has to meet a statutory definition that in particular requires any distributions from the trust to be to all employees on same terms. The trust deed must also include prohibitions on certain types of activities that in the past have led to tax abuse. So, for example, trustee of an EOT cannot make loans to beneficiaries. Also, because of the UK tax exemptions that apply when an EOT has a controlling interest in a company, you can be pretty sure that any EOT will have a controlling interest in a trading company, or soon will have if it's just been set up. And the success of the EOT in the UK has attracted attention in Ireland and Australia. And there are initiatives underway to test the UK structure for an EOT in these jurisdictions to see how well it stands up legally, commercially, from an accounting and tax point of view. And the signs are promising. The model works well legally and commercially. There's just much more to do to understand the tax, financing and accounting aspects. So in summary, the EOT is a success in the UK, and there are initiatives to promote it in Ireland and Australia. Thank you.
Fantastic. And just by way of update, I'll say that we're just getting our feet on the ground here with the EOT model in the US, at least in the contemporary period. We've got some of the leading examples of US EOTs here with us today, thankfully. And as far as legislation is concerned, although nothing prohibits the creation of an EOT in the US, we are looking to, as Graham did, gain some preferential treatment of EOT companies and for business owners that engage in EOT transactions. And so we've got legislation that has been submitted as bill in form of a bill in the state of Wisconsin in the Senate. We also have a bill slimmed down somewhat in Maryland, and that's gone to committees in both houses and gotten unanimous approval in both of those committees. They say, at least in Maryland, but they say the same thing in New York State, that the third year is kind of the charm. You have to go to the back of the line and wait 3 years before your bill is going to proceed into law. Unfortunately, this was the third year in Maryland, so I'm not sure how lucky that we're going to get this year because of the ongoing situation. But that's an update. We have heard that other activist or advocacy groups that are interested in including the EOT in their employee ownership legislation recently got some inquiries from some folks in California, Minnesota, and elsewhere. So hopefully we'll have a bright future ahead for EOT legislation here in the US. So with that said, Graham, I'll turn it back over to you to introduce our UK company leaders.
Thank you. I'd like to introduce, first of all, Rob Howard, who is Managing Director of Riverford Organic Farmers. He's worked at Riverford for over 16 years and has worked his way up through the ranks in that time, becoming Managing Director in 2013. And he worked with the founder of Riverford, Guy Singh Watson, and the leadership team to transition that company to employee ownership in summer 2018. And the first 2 years of life as an employee-owned company have been the most successful yet in the history, the 34-year history of Riverford. So with that introduction, we look forward to hearing from you, Rob, as to what life is like as an employee-owned company.
Great. Thank you very much, Graham. Thanks, Chris. And thanks very much for inviting me to come along and tell our story. So just a little bit more about Riverford in a nutshell, very quickly. So we're an organic food business. We're based in the southwest of England, in lovely sunny Devon, which it is at the moment. And we deliver around England, predominantly over into Wales. We do about 56,000 deliveries direct from our farm or our farmers out to people's homes. So we don't go through a supermarket. It's all delivered direct to their doors. As Graham said, we were established by Guy Singh Watson in 1986, who's an organic grower himself. Today we have 750 employees, now co-owners of the business, and our turnover is around $90 million US, so a kind of medium-sized business. In terms of our sort of journey, I mean, Guy, I've known him for quite a long time, longer than that, 16 years, over 20 years. And he is one of those founders. He's founded the business on a set of values, been an organic grower since he started it. He's always had a passion for thinking that business should be there to do something more than just create wealth from minority. And I mean, I never really got this early on, but he's had a strong view from a pretty early age that at some point the issue of ownership and his legacy needed to be something more responsible than just passing it over to the highest bidder and it being stripped of its values and turned into something else. So there's, I think, in terms of what that might have turned into, he's had loads of thoughts over the years, anything from whether it was staff to, we have franchisees, network of franchisees, our suppliers, our customers, a hybrid of all those sorts of things were banded about a little bit. But what was the underlying motivation initially through this journey up until the point where I'll talk about getting serious with it, was not letting the wrong people get their hands on this business that he'd worked so hard to create. And I suspect that we might hear that echoed in other stories today. So he'd been talking about it for a long time, I think for various reasons, things going on in the wider market, us thinking, Guy's got plenty of years left in him yet. A lot of us were thinking, why are we worrying about this right now? It doesn't feel like, this is going back a few years, but it doesn't feel like this is a pressing issue. And it wasn't quite the right time for the business. And then we got to 2016, and actually the business was in good shape. We had a good established senior leadership team. Guy was pretty comfortable with things. And I think that's the right foundation to be making decisions like this from, not in a panic. And we sat down, we have a lovely little restaurant on the farm here. We sat down and it was me, the finance director, and our people director. And we said, look, Guy, is this the right time for us to actually make the move and turn this conversation that's been going on for a decade into a reality? And he was very quick. He said, yeah, it's fine. Let's get on with it and make it happen. So we set ourselves at that point, that was early in 2016, 2 years, which may feel like to people listening and watching, a long time, but I would say we needed a long time to initially research, so find out what the options were, what the models were, what the right approach was for us, and then 1 year to make it happen. And I think we needed that time. So we set that time. Guy was a bit, thought that was a bit too long, but ultimately he accepted it. And we set that time. We went about researching the options. So we got in touch with Graham very early on to look at the trust model. We went out and saw loads of other businesses that were adopting various different approaches. And we quite quickly got to the first decision, which was that it had to be a model with the staff. All those other approaches, while they maybe had some merit, were hugely complicated and not very well established. And actually any model we saw that had multiple forms of ownership felt difficult to set it up, difficult to communicate, difficult to derive benefit from. So we quite quickly in that 2016 concluded that staff were the right route. You know, we're a pretty values-driven business. A lot of people who work here are very committed to what we try and do. They work here for that reason. So who better to be the sort of custodians of the business into the future, both its commercial guardianship and its values guardianship. So that was quite quick. But then what took longer was what was the right route of ownership within that model. So we looked at the trust model, we looked at a direct ownership model, and we looked at a hybrid. And in terms of the evolution of our thinking, we liked the trust initially. You know, we knew it was established. Graham had done a lot of work to get it into that place. You know, it was established in bigger businesses, and as a way of doing something fair and that really kind of protected the ownership of the business in the future. It was a very good way of doing that. We had a few reservations about whether it was going to slow down decision making and whether it really created the kind of energy and life that you wanted out of ownership of the business. So we had a few reservations about it from that perspective. So we went and had a look at direct, and we thought, okay, this has some merits too. You know, if you own shares in the business and sorry, someone's coming into the room. If you own shares in the business and you can see those shares go up and down in value with the success of the business, then that might be a really live way of making you very committed to it. So we quite like that for a bit. And then we thought, okay, well, is there any way that you can get the best of both these worlds? Can you get the benefits of the EOT in terms of the stability and the established nature of the trust and the tax benefits for both the seller and the employee owners with the live element of direct shares? So you would have to have been 51% into the trust, proportion into direct shares, and then Guy was always going to retain a little bit in this kind of hybrid model. In the end, we went when we talked to all of our staff about this a lot through the process, and we went around the houses and we sort of went, well, what are we trying to achieve here? We're trying to achieve a ownership structure which is fair for all, feels fair for all, protects the business in the future from the wrong people getting their hands on it, and delivers some financial benefit. I mean, you know, the owner deserves a bit of financial benefit. There's no capital gains tax on the sale, which is great, but also there's a financial benefit for owners in the profit share that we have. You don't have to pay tax on. And we all came to the conclusion, having thought about all this, that the trust was the right route. Trying to kind of hybridize it and put the two together was going to get really complicated to explain. It's going to get messy, and you're going to end up in a position where you still had some people in the business, might be me, with loads more shares than someone else, and that wasn't what we were trying to create. So with the help of the staff, we concluded that the right route was EOT, and Guy decided that he was put 74% of his shares, retained 26%, 74% into the EOT. So by early in 2017, we'd concluded that was the right route. So lots of help, lots of research along the way. We were starting to set about getting all the legals put in place with Graham and his team. We then had to kind of make it happen in reality. So it's probably useful for those listening to understand what this looks like for us as a structure now. So we had to start making these things happen. Now, in the middle of it all is still a fairly conventional management hierarchy. So there's still a board, there's still an MD, there's still management layers, there's still the sort of triangle, if you like. And it's really important that communication and information and management and accountability flows and works through that kind of central triangle hierarchy in the way that it did before. But what's added, which is really important, are the elements of governance that are essential within EOT, and some things that are added on. So we have a co-owner council. So within that are co-owners, so or staff, now co-owners, elect, they're split into groups of about 30. They elect a representative to sit on a co-owner council. So all of our 750 co-owners are represented by someone who sits on that council. And they are really the eyes and the ears of all of our co-owners. They're there to tell us if something's going wrong, but they're there also for us to get their opinion on stuff, which we do all of the time. 2 members of the council are elected by the wider business to sit on the trust. So 2 members of our 2 co-owner members sit on the trust. And the trust has also got Guy, the founder, and 2 external trustees. And they're kind of our wise elders that have been around, done it, seen it in other places. And the trust responsibility is absolutely critical. They're not meddling in the nicest possible way, meddling in the day-to-day running of the business. That's not their job, but they are there to be effectively the protectors of Riverford. So they stop anyone from coming in and buying it. You know, that's a fundamentally important role. They protect our values. So those are written out out in those legal documents. We spent a lot of time working that through, probably gave Graham a bit of a headache in the process, but trying to build in the key things about Riverford that we wanted protecting, and then the trust have to protect them. So if me and the leadership team take it in the wrong direction, they have to intervene at that point. So they have to know enough to know whether that's happening. And ultimately also, if things are going in the wrong direction commercially and the leadership team is taking it in the wrong direction commercially, the trust have to protect us then as well, and they have the power ultimately to remove me. So the trust can change the course by basically changing the leadership of the business. So the trust is there. It's got two externals. It's got the founder and it's got two co-owners sitting on it. It's a critical role in protecting us. There's another element, which is the remuneration committee, which again, we wrapped up into the legals. Now, that's a committee that is there to make sure pay is fair within Riverford and competitive beyond Riverford. We didn't have one of those before. No, that's fairly established in a lot of businesses. We didn't have one of those before. I think possibly what's different about it is that also has co-owners sitting on it. It's got non-executives, it's got a member of the trust, and then it's got three co-owners sitting on it, because we have some principles within our pay structure. It's not equal pay, but there are some principles and ratios between top and bottom. And we felt that one of the important things about what we were trying to do was to make sure it couldn't be those in power deciding their pay. That felt totally wrong in employee-owned businesses. And having co-owners on the REMCOM felt like the right way to make sure that was protected in the future. So we have these structures sitting together. We have this management hierarchy sitting in the middle. We have a REMCOM that is supporting decisions on pay. We have the trust as the guardians, and then we have the council as the ears and eyes, effectively, of all the co-owners in the business. So we set all that up through 2017 and into early 2018, and then by June the 8th, 2018, we were ready to go. Actually, it was a bit of a rally at the last minute, despite having 2 years to get there, but we got there, which was our defined sort of end point. And we ended with a brilliant party. We have a lovely farm here, so we're very lucky, but we put a huge Circus Big Top up on the farm here, had 500 members of our what were staff come into the Big Top on the day. We signed the documents on that day, so they walked in as members of staff, they walked out as co-owners of the business. We had an almighty party, which we're quite good at, and we got I think employee ownership off to the right start in terms of it being a big thing, you know, not just a ownership thing, but a really big thing for the people in the business. And as Graham said very kindly in the introduction, we've done 2 years now. It's just been our second anniversary when most people are watching this, just had it. And we've had two of our most successful years yet. And it's difficult to say whether that's entirely down to employee ownership, but I think it's played a part. So, so far so good. A couple of years in, a bit early, but so far so good. So I hope that gives everyone a pretty good feel for what we did and why, and how it's sort of working so far. And obviously look forward to answering any questions as we get to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. One memorable thing that you did to ensure completion happened on the allotted day is that Guy arranged for the BBC cameras to turn up on the farm to film completion, which was a very helpful negotiating tactic when the bank was still being a bit slow with some of the documents. We said,
yeah, it was quite nice.
You're keeping the media waiting.
Yeah, no one wants to hold up the BBC, which is, you know, quite good leverage.
Our next speaker from the UK is Barry Horner. Barry is CEO and co-founder of what is now employee-owned Paradigm Norton Financial Planning. You know, there are financial planners, and then there is Paradigm Norton. Barry leads the team of 70, and he's led them to a prestigious position in which they're widely regarded as one of the most respected financial planning firms in the UK, an achievement recognised within the profession through winning over 27 professional awards since the company was founded in 2001. Barry is a regular contributor to the press. He's also a past chair of the Denver-based Financial Planning Standards Board and a past president of the UK's Institute of Financial Planning. In 2019, he was voted one of the top 100 industry's most influential by International Advisor. Barry is here to tell us how one of the very first businesses, IFA businesses, to convert to employee ownership got itself into EOT ownership. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Graham, for that fine introduction. And welcome everyone. It's great to have the opportunity to share some of our journey over just over 12 months we've been employee owned. So what do we do? We're financial planners, as Graham says. We provide 4 sort of core services to private clients: financial planning, investment portfolio management, philanthropy, and personal tax. And that's sort of what we do, why we do it. We believe our sort of strap line is money matters, but life matters more. So we're really there to help people along the journey of aligning their money and, and their personal goals. And I think over the time we've been going, since 2001, we've done that pretty successfully. We're based in the Southwest, very near Rob, our previous contributor. We've also got an office in London. We're independently owned, so not tied to any one particular investment companies. And at the moment, we serve about 1,200 families across the UK. And in terms of structure, we're sort of professional services model, so very similar to a legal or an accounting firm, responsible for about 1.2 billion of client funds that we look after. And we became employee owned in March 2019. And our structure at the moment is we are sort of a hybrid EOT. 80% is owned by the trust, 20% owned by other individuals. And the only reason we didn't go 100% from day one is that some of those individuals had only just got shares. So we felt it was only right to allow them to continue to keep their shares. And then the plan is over time that we'll become 100% owned. And through Graham's guidance, that's been enshrined in the legal process. We're also a B Corporation, a benefit corporation, where we have a legal obligation to focus not only on profit, and we translate that as look after clients and profits will follow, but also on people and planet. And that was another significant project that we achieved last year. So why employee ownership for Paradigm Norton? We're a very values-driven organization. We've got 4 core values that are really the heartbeat of the firm. And our 4th core value that we really developed many years ago is building for the long term. And I thought it would be really difficult for us to find a genuine acquirer of the firm. I'm 60, so we've been on this sort of succession journey that would genuinely look after the business and maintain our values in the way that we hold dear. So we set off on this journey, partly helped through bringing in a non-exec about 6 years ago. He was talking to us about the need for succession planning. 6 years ago, it didn't really seem like it was an important focus, but we've realized how important it is to do this journey well. So we, like you'd imagine, we examined every opportunity. We looked at a management buyout, but the nature of a lot of the team members that we have, it became apparent very early on that that wasn't going to be a model that we could follow. Many of those that would like to buy into the business simply weren't going to be able to afford to do so. We looked at trade sales, we looked at selling the business on the stock market, and in the process of looking at all of these things, which took us about 60 months, to be honest, and after about 3 or 4 years, we suddenly stumbled across this whole idea of employee ownership. And the moment we discovered what an EOT was, we thought that absolutely felt right. And 14 months later, having become employee owned, I don't think we've ever looked back, and we feel that that's really met the needs of our business. So what was it that impacted on us when we were looking at this journey that really led to us becoming employee owned? And there's probably a number of reasons. We sort of socialized the whole idea with our team very early on. Again, that was advice we took from Graham. He was saying, don't rush into these things. Make sure every stakeholder across the business has had a view, and that's what we did. But as we started to share with the team, they absolutely loved the whole idea of getting more involved in the running of the business. We've always been very participative in terms of the way that we've run the business. That's sort of my style of doing things. And it just seemed I could take the business a stage further in doing that. And what would come with a greater contribution from them also led to greater reward. So surprise, surprise, they didn't mind the idea of being able to have greater profit share. And for us, what the EOT model did meant essentially that every member of the team could be an owner. And that was particularly important. It secured the legacy of the business. So we're now I'm working with the trustees and with our partners, as we call them, rather than co-owners. I'm working on our 2030 picture of success. So what do we collectively want the business to look like in a decade's time? The operating board welcomed the opportunity to sort of have further interaction with the trustees. And our genuine belief is the more people you involve in decision making, the better the decision making comes. For some of the founders, I say the business has been going 20 years, they had visibility of a sale, which is important, albeit payment over time. But being a financial planning business, we're all pretty good financial planners. So the fact that we could be paid over time didn't seem to be a deterrent. And in fact, we've now started the deferred payments, have just started to be paid, which is great. Stats speak for themselves in terms of employee buy-in, greater increased participation, more competitive, greater profits to be distributed. Again, it's the early days. We've only had one full financial year. It was one of our best years, but I think we've yet to see the real benefits coming through in our numbers of being employee-owned. Clients absolutely love the whole idea. So when we started going back to them, talking and socializing about the whole idea of becoming employee-owned, they really loved the idea of we're taking our clients on a journey, and it's a long-term journey. It's a long-term relationship. So for them, knowing that we were going to be around in years to come was hugely advantageous. And the Paradigm Norton logo is PN for life. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to build genuine long-term relationships with our clients. So the idea of employee ownership was absolutely perfect. We have a graduate program. So again, for them, the idea of being able to think that they're investing in a career that could be 20 or 30 years, rather than me having to stand up at any one point in time and say, I've got some great news for you. We've been sold to the highest bidder, and their hearts thinking, what on earth does that mean for us going forward? As I said, we're a sort of a genuine live and breathe by our values. So the fact that we could continue with our values, we have a culture and values team, which now reports into the trustees, was a huge, big win for the team. So where are we now? Some 14 months into employee ownership. We've started to share some profit distributions. We've put in place now a board, again, through Graham's guidance. We have an independent chair who does a fantastic job, so leading us and steering us through this sort of new environment for us. I'm a special director, so I sit on both boards. And then we have 3 employee appointed directors and 3 directors appointed by the operating board. But the governance structure is working really well. I'm really encouraged by the sort of traction we've got in a relatively short space of time. And to bring you right up to date, we're working on 3 really key documents at the moment. The first one we're calling the powers document, for want of a better word, and that's when do we inform the trustees, when does the operating board consult, and when do they have the right to go, no, we're not happy with that, we need the powers of approval. So that's been a really helpful iterative process, working with our senior leadership team and our board to come up with that. We've also got a high-level principles document, which, as the name suggests, just essentially sets out the parameters in which all 3 of those different entities, governance entities, work together. And then we've got a document which we call the rhythms document, again, for want of a better word at the moment, which really describes the interaction of how the senior leadership team, board and trustees are working, and where that's working extremely well. The trustees are now going to start to meet with the auditors, and sort of it's the rhythm and heartbeat of how an employee-owned business like Paradigm Norton works. My sort of mantra at the moment is think like a partner. I'm trying to, again, we've been going for 20 years, so people have suddenly moved from being employees to partners, and it's not something that overnight, I think they immediately get the idea of the change, but we're focusing on 4 things: information, reward, influence, and behavior. So making sure that they have the right amount of information so they genuinely feel like partners, and that's a 2-way thing. We need information back. Reward, again, in an employee-owned business, speaks for itself. Influence, how do we make sure that they genuinely feel they're participating in the business? And behavior, which is their bit, they need to start to take and own problems and issues exactly as they would in any other firm. So that's sort of where we've got to. There have been, as I wrap up, some unanticipated benefits, which have been great. So we've now got another sort of proving ground for leadership. So we've got a number of people on the board who are really stepping up. And for us, it's been great to see them leading meetings. We've got a EOT trustee meeting coming up, and one of our PAs is leading the next meeting, and she's very nervous about the idea, but it's great that she can participate in that. Greater engagement in business decisions. So certainly as we go through the current challenges at the moment, it's super to get the perspectives of a much wider group. They're certainly holding us to an account, to the operating board to account, which is great. helping us really look through the issues that we're faced at the moment as a business around COVID-19 and asking some really helpful and searching questions for us. We now have what we call a weekly partner huddle, which over the last couple of months whilst in lockdown is particularly helpful in terms of just the mental health and well-being of the team, making sure that we're regularly connecting in with our partners. And that's how we would describe as our sort of weekly family connection. We've also secured an acquisition through being an employee owned. They really love the model. And last year we had 174 grads for our graduate, 174 applicants for our graduate program. And the reasons given were partly through being a benefit corporation, but also they loved the governance structure. So it's a fantastically empowering model to my mind. It helps distribute wealth across the business in a very fair way. And as we've hit this sort of COVID bump in the road, it also means the owner mentality kicks in, and we've had no problems at all with our partners sharing not only the upside, but they're now having to participate in the downside too. So that's just some of my journey of Paradigm Norton in 14 months, and I hope that's been helpful. So that's it from me.
Thank you very much, Barry. Over to you, Chris, for our next two speakers.
Fantastic. That was absolutely fascinating from Rob and Barry. I have the good fortune now of presenting our two U.S. EOT company leaders. We'll start with Matthias Scheiblener. Matthias is a longtime carpenter and builder working in the Seattle area. He began to develop an interest in social justice and alternative economic models back when he was a graduate student in history at the University of Washington. He founded Metis Construction in 2008 and transitioned to an employee ownership trust in 2016. Of course, the dog begins to bark on cue. Looking at U.S. history, I mean, going back, putting aside, 100 years ago or 80 years ago, to our knowledge, in the contemporary scene in employee ownership community in the United States, it appears to be the case that Matthias made some history in having Metis become the first U.S. employee ownership trust company, or employee ownership trust company in the U.S. based using U.S. law in the contemporary period. He served as president and CFO there until just very recently in 2020, when he left to start a new firm, a new construction firm. I'll leave it to you then, Matthias.
Thanks for the introduction, Chris, and thanks for inviting me to be a part of this discussion. I've had a number of opportunities to talk about Metis as the founder and the president, but this is my first opportunity to talk about it as the former president. So that's interesting turn of events. But anyway, I'll dive right in. So I founded Metis in 2008. And at the time, Metis was part of a group of small contractors. And it was really a truly remarkable group of people. The group shared a commitment to craftsmanship, a near boundless capacity for really, really hard work and long, long days, and no fondness for being anybody's employee, to be honest. And so we operated essentially as a collective. We would come together in different combinations to take on larger projects than we could on our own. And it was a really, pretty amazing moment in the development of Metis, but also in my own career as a builder. And it was amazing to be part of that community of small business owners. There's something about, what drives somebody to be a small business owner, to be a small contractor, that is really interesting to think about in the context of cooperatives. Metis is certainly a smaller company than the ones we've heard from so far today. At its height, it had nearly 40 employees, but and probably volume of around 8 million. But still, a really interesting example, I think. And so essentially what happened is that over time, more and more of the projects that were coming into this group were coming in under the umbrella of Metis. And it got to the point that we had independent contractors essentially that were working more or less full time for Metis, and this raised issues of compliance with labor laws. There was certainly a real love amongst everybody in the group of the type of work we were doing under the umbrella of Metis. They were really great projects, a lot of restaurant build outs, as well as new residential construction and additions. There was no interest on the part of any of these people in becoming my employee. And so for my part, I'd always had this interest in social justice and the ideas around kind of alternative economic models. And that kind of led to this idea that perhaps a worker co-op might be the way to go. At the same time, I had some real concerns. And those concerns included the idea that down the road somewhere, a small group of people or an individual might reconsolidate ownership of the company, or that it might be taken in a very different direction than the kind of adherence to triple bottom line principles that on which the company had been founded. But still, in spite of that, my awareness of the role that the small group of people had in Metis' success, it just made sense that they should share in the rewards as this company grew and developed. And so it was with all of this in mind, and through a number of discussions with Chris, that we arrived at this idea of a EOT, and the trust enabled us. So essentially, the conversion of Metis to a worker co-op really ended up taking the form of a transfer of ownership from a sole proprietorship to a trust. What the trust provided was, again, a guarantee that the ownership of the company could not be reconsolidated, a guarantee that we remained worker-owned in perpetuity. It provided for adherence to the triple bottom line. In addition, we had provisions in there that make it so that if for some reason the company had to be sold or liquidated, any proceeds that exceeded what was owed to member owners would be given to a nonprofit that supported worker ownership. We also had provisions in there around making sure that the company strove to address equity issues in the United States, which obviously is a very prescient issue today. And so the trust has functioned remarkably well. Essentially right now, the company is just a little bit about organization and structure. The company is structured in terms of kind of governance versus daily operations. There's a board of trustees that oversees membership meetings, would hire the president, my former position, would oversee membership votes around allocation of profits between members and the retained earnings account, oversee elections to the board of trustees. The board of trustees is made up of both employees, non-member employees, and employee or member owners of the company. All employees at the company are on a trajectory, a path to ownership. If somebody works for the company for 5 years or 8,000 hours, they get an automatic offer of ownership. That's enshrined in the trust. The board of trustees' primary function is essentially to ensure adherence to the trust. And this is then followed up with in an annual audit that Chris oversees to make sure that the company adheres to the trust. While I was there, this was kind of a low priority, but now that I'm gone, we're actually going through our first process of auditing the company. And of course, this is with COVID is a difficult time for any company, but we're weathering it, or Metis is weathering it. And then on the operations side, there's a management working group that would oversee daily construction operations, daily operation of the business, anything day to day. The bigger picture vision and whatnot would return. That would be more a board of trustees again. So that's a little bit about organization, structure of the company. But now, kind of from the position of the former president, having an opportunity to kind of reflect on the story of Metis a little bit. And one thing that I'm really struck by, something that I think a lot about, is that of that remarkable group of people that I started out with, this group of small contractors, only 2 of them became member owners, 3 if you include me. And at this point, none of them are there anymore. And that's, given me really kind of cause for pause to think about the vision behind this. It was very driven by a sense of the necessity that there be some economic justice, that those who helped build the company share in the rewards. And yet none of them are there at this point. I mean, obviously the people that are there now have also helped build the company, but the original group is gone. And I can't help but think that there was a kind of, on my part, a single-minded commitment to these ideals of economic justice that turned something of a blind eye to the importance of democratic process. And so in thinking about cooperatives, there is, of course, profit sharing. And at Metis, profit sharing is, it's radically egalitarian. Your wages are merit-based, but what you receive in terms of a share of the profits is based just on an hour worked. So the president or a laborer just entering the company would receive the exact same profit share for an hour worked. And so, on that level, I feel very good about the company. But that single-minded focus on profit sharing turned a blind eye to the importance of democratic process and a sense of participation amongst those original owners in the development of the architecture of the trust. And I can't help but wonder if there had been, I certainly was open to feedback, but if we had developed that trust document together, whether more of those people wouldn't have stuck around. Because I think as human beings, participating in determining the conditions under which we live and work is, what more do you want than that? I mean, that's more profound in a way than sharing in profits. And if there had been more of an opportunity, I can't help but wonder if some of those small contractors, those small business owners, who became small contractors and small business owners because they wanted to determine the conditions under which they live and work, might have stayed around in this cooperative environment and been, ended up being longer term participants. But anyway, that's the story of Metis to date, and I'll return it back to you, Chris.
Extremely, personally find that extremely interesting, Matthias. Rick now, Rick Plimpton, is the CEO of Optimax, which is a precision optics manufacturer near Rochester, New York. He's helped lead the company over the past 25 years from a small startup to America's largest precision optics manufacturer. He's very involved in regional workforce development and in the optics industry more generally. He's a board member at Canandaigua National Bank, and he's the chair of the Finger Lakes Workforce Investment Board. He was also named as a 2018-2019 Aspen Institute Fellow for Job Quality. He has been inducted into the Rochester Business Hall of Fame and was 2012 SBA New York State Small Business Person of the Year Award. Rick, I'll get your slides going here.
So at Optimax, I titled the presentation Business Leadership in the Age of Aquarius because I really think the way businesses operate these days, certainly the way our business operates, everyone is educated and has training and should share in the wealth creation that happens here by the team. And so, we've always operated our business in a way to honor all of our employees. I started my career on the production floor, and then kind of rose up in the organization. And today I'm CEO here at Optimax. Just a quick overview of what Optimax is all about, and then I'll talk more about our corporate culture and our EOT journey. So we are located outside Rochester, New York, in Ontario. So Rochester is the home of Kodak and Bausch & Lomb. In a very small way, we're carrying on the legacy of precision optics manufacturing that was started here over 100 years ago. Today, we have about 120,000 square feet with just under 400 employees. And what we make is a wide variety of precision optics for all sorts of different applications. We are a key supplier to NASA. So some of the program, it's wonderful to see NASA having some successes. You know, Spirit, Opportunity, and Curiosity, we made optics for all of those rovers. And we also made a bunch of optics for the 2020 rover, which is due to launch in July, you know, just a few weeks from now. I look forward to that. Another big area for us is making optics for the semiconductor market. They use high precision laser systems, produce all the microelectronics that go into our computers and cell phones and so forth. And that's a big segment for us. Another really fun area that we've been prototyping the last several years is autonomous vehicles. And this is an emerging technology that's going to change how we live our daily lives. It's really exciting. So those are just a few examples. Our mission statement here at Optimax is really simple: enabling customer success and employee prosperity. Anytime there's a tension or a problem, we try to focus on satisfying the customer and then resolving any personnel issues that might have gone along with that, and ensuring that you know, we take care of our employees. And we have a really strong wellness program here at Optimax. When early on, we were growing the business by the sphere of influence of the owners, which was just a few of us. And then a few years ago, we expanded or sort of delegated the authority and responsibility to a younger leadership team, which was about 15 people. And so this balloon kind of illustrates or this graphic kind of illustrates what happens there is, as you expand the leadership in the organization can grow at a much greater rate because so many other people are getting involved and providing value and insight into where to go with the business. And that's we had reached a point about 7 or 8 years ago where we averaged about 20% revenue growth per year, and we were slowing down. And then as the younger professionals here took over and started getting more involved in the leadership of the business, we started growing very rapidly again. So some of the things that we do to support that: open book management. We have always shared our financials with our employees every month. We'll have, at the beginning of the month, we'll have a company meeting and we'll show our employees you know, how we did last month, what our revenues were, our expenses, and how much profit we made. We have a self-management culture that's based on trust. And like I said, I started my career on the production floor. We just have a fundamental belief that most people wake up in the morning and they want to create value. And so what we have to do as leaders in the organization is give them the training, resources, and information they need to come into work and do what needs to get done to create value for our customers. And those are the kinds of people that are very successful here at Optimax, people that are self-motivated. We have a policy, and this is something we're still working on, where employees advocate for fair pay. I don't like the historical way of management telling people what they're worth. I like a philosophy of people doing their own research, evaluating what their position is worth, and then proposing that to their team members. If the team members agree, that's what they get paid. But that's something we're still working on developing. We have a culture of continuous learning. We expect every one of our team members to be learning each year and becoming stronger in their role or in a new role that they're playing here at the company. And also a culture of continuous improvement, where we're constantly looking for innovation or ways to be more efficient with the work that we do. In terms of our long-term goals or succession goals, my business partner is in his 60s, and for the last several years, I've been tasked with finding a succession plan or working with him to establish a succession plan for Optimax. And so we're looking at 100 years of prosperity, ongoing innovation, creating jobs, and ensuring that we provide community support, particularly with regard to workforce development and supporting programs for children to get involved in STEM education or technical education. Some of the things we looked at a wide variety of ways to sell the business, and a lot, business owners that can hand it off to their children or grandchildren, more power to them. That wasn't in the cards for us. the easiest thing for a business owner to do is kind of clean up their financials and sell the business. But we just know that any conglomerate or multinational that bought Optimax would ruin the corporate culture that we have built here. We're not really bright for an IPO, so that doesn't work for us. I looked hard at ESOP. I've always felt that every employee should have the opportunity to have some equity. When I was younger, I worked for a big multinational. I would have loved to just have one share, but that wasn't in the cards. Oh, sorry. We looked at leverage management buyout, and that was looking pretty good for a little while, but the realization we had is even if we could figure out a way to sell the business or turn the business over to our young professionals, when they, in 20 or 30 years, when they're ready to retire, the company would be of a size and value that they would probably have to sell it. So that didn't work out long term. We looked at other forms of organic succession, B Corp and trusts, and none of those really hit on all the metrics we were looking for. The one thing with trust when we first looked at it was that typically you need beneficiaries. You need to identify who the beneficiaries are, and I really didn't like that that game plan until last year when I met Chris Michael, and we started talking about trusts, and he introduced me to the concept of employee ownership trust, and it really hit on all the different things that we were looking for, because the way Chris described it, we didn't have to have a beneficiary. We could define a purpose, and the trust would be all around that purpose. He called it a perpetual purpose trust, and this really resonated with us. So we started looking at how we might do that, and these are some of the key points. Elimination of shareholder interests. So I think it's really, really important in the startup of a business to have investors and shareholders. But once a business grows and becomes viable as a self-sustaining economic force, you no longer have a need for those shareholders. What you have a need for is a motivated team that continue to grow and prosper. So as a perpetual purpose trust, we could put all the voting shares into that trust and sort of lock it up there, and write a purpose where the company would never be sold, and then establish a philanthropic mission to support Optimax in the community and workforce development efforts. In terms of rewarding our team members, we have a monthly profit sharing program here at Optimax of 25%. And we've been doing that for over 20 years, and it's a beautiful thing. For the last several years, we've averaged about $1,000 per employee each month for our bonus. And there are some years that are really tough years, like 08, 09. We didn't have big bonuses, but most years we're doing pretty well. And all the employees get to benefit from that. We also have a weekly 401k matching program. And the way these things are structured here at Optimax, I have a belief that every employee can become a millionaire by the time they retire. So it's not just, a few lucky people at the top of the organization that will become millionaires, but every single employee should have the ability to become a millionaire. And we've tried to establish that here at Optimax. So in terms of the perpetual purpose trust and the structure, we have the trust as the ownership entity, and Optimax will operate as a C Corp, a for-profit business underneath that. And the responsibilities of the trust is don't sell the company, ensure that Optimax leadership is honoring its mission, where it's enabling customer success and employee prosperity, and then share the wealth with the workforce. So, looking at the long-term picture, it really hit on all of our metrics. We want to see 100 years of prosperity. We want to see continued job creation here in the region, and we want to strengthen our families and our community. I really view this as an evolution of capitalism, where we've finally found a way that we can structure corporations to share the wealth with the team that creates the wealth. So then the challenge becomes for each business is what can they do in the community that provides value and brings wealth into the community. And I really think that's a much better way for us to grow communities around the world. So thank you. Thanks for letting me share, Chris. That's what we're all about, and that's where we're going.
So, I have us having maybe, 5 minutes or so. Maybe, why don't we go shoot for a little casual discussion here, and if we can work it in, clip it in somehow, we can do that. There's no harm in it. If for some reason we can't use it or something, it's not the end of the world either. So, and sorry, Rick, I can't see the mouse when I give you control, the mouse becomes invisible to me, and then I'm trying to mute myself so that my 3-year-old and dog aren't coming across, and becomes a bit messy. But I can clean all that up. So I'm gonna go, and that's it. I'll go on mute again and leave it open to you guys to chat a bit.
Thank you very much for those presentations. What struck me is how similar the messages are. I did pick up on one thing, which was a reference to a purpose trust. And just to clarify that, in the UK, we can't have purpose trusts except for charitable purposes, which is why our trusts are for the benefit of all the employees for the time being in a particular company or group. But it still means nobody gets named. Everybody's in that class of potential beneficiaries. I just wondered if anybody else picked up any differences, or whether we can agree that employee ownership trusts are essentially serving the same purpose, whether it's in the UK or the US.
Question. So in the UK, does each employee actually have equity?
No, everyone has the right to be considered as a beneficiary, but no shares are actually allocated to anybody, which keeps it really straightforward from a tax point of view. Nobody has an interest in the shares, so there are no tax complications. So whenever the trustee makes a decision, they've got to take into account the interests of all those employees.
Yeah, so the way our trust is set up, all of the voting shares are in the trust. And then we created a Class B share that the Optimax board of directors can issue out to leadership members as a long-term incentive. So they're able to sell those shares back to the company, but the Class B shares have no voting power. They do have dividend rights, but no voting shares. They're really a long-term incentive.
We do get hybrid models in the UK. The vital ingredient is that the employee trust, the EOT, has to have a controlling interest. So it has to have the majority of votes and the majority of dividends. But perhaps during a deferred payment period, when the existing founders are still being paid off, some companies do incentivize their executives during that period, because it's quite a challenging time.
And I would say that that's probably the one difference, Rick, in the EOT model within the UK. I mean, that your aspiration that you would want to enable all of your co-owners, your employees, to potentially become millionaires one day. I don't think that works with this model. I think that's fun, whether it's the top of the tree or further down. I think there is something inherent within an EOT within the UK, which is there are financial benefits, but they're relatively modest. So you can get up to £3,600. I think it's still that, Graham, tax-free each year, but that's not going to make you a millionaire. So I think it's a nice, I would say it's a nice added extra, but all of the cultural elements that you really want to be trying to drive home as part of being an employee-owned business, backed up by the fact that no one can take it over and turn it into something that it doesn't, no one wants it to be, are far more important than the financial benefits. They're the icing on the cake, as I see it. And I see it that way, and I would say most of our employee owners would see it that way.
I'm curious, Matthias, you mentioned that, for your organization, all the original guys left. We had a few people leave that couldn't see the vision of where we were going. Barry and Rob, did you experience that as well with a few of your members, or did everybody stick around?
In our business, I mean, we're 14 months in, and we haven't lost anyone at all. But I mean, I guess what becoming an EOT allows you to do, it transitions ownership. It doesn't necessarily transfer leadership. So the next bit I'm now working on is still the incumbent CEO pre-EOT and post is what that needs to look like. So at the moment, the leadership of the business is the same, and it's been hugely successful in terms of being able to start to pay profit share out. But I agree with Rob, it's fantastic, but it's not life-changing in terms of the amount you can do.
And I think our situation is slightly different in that we had one owner who'd owned it for 32 years, which I think it is really and I don't know whether that's part of the challenge, Matthias, but the emotional sort of feeling of owning something that you've established for 32 years and then passing it over, thinking about it for a long time, that being the thing you want to do, but then actually waking up the next morning and thinking, I don't own this anymore, I think is a really, it's a really difficult thing to do. And Guy, who was our owner, I think found the last year of us becoming employee owned incredibly difficult indeed. He really struggled with it. Actually, once we got over the line and he's got comfortable with a new position, he's slightly more removed, but he's still involved. We haven't done anything stupid, which I think occasionally he thought we might. He's become really quite comfortable with it and is still a real asset to the business. And I know, and I've heard this at Employee Ownership Trust conferences here in the UK, that one of the first one we went to when I was the MD and Guy was still the owner, someone got up and said that when you're about to do this, you've either got to shoot the owner or you've got to shoot the MD for it to work. I mean, so far no one's had to get the gun out, so we're all right so far. But I think that emotional transition to it being something different for you it's not easy for everyone.
Definitely, and I think that there is that. I definitely share the sentiment that decisions made by the larger group tend to be better decisions. The vision of the larger group, it would follow is a more profound, better vision, and yet it's not my vision. And I think you have to get used to that and really embrace it, and that's part of the challenge. And I think the other thing that was a little bit unique in Metis's case is, at that time, there were no employees per se, right? It was a group of small contractors that it was like a collective. And so it was a slightly different kind of transition. But yeah, they're definitely interesting challenges there as the previous owner.
Mm-hmm.
What would you have done differently? Would you have done longer, deeper consultation with them? I mean, what's the sort of key lesson you've learned from the process you've been through?
I think it was really that, like I said, so much was motivated by this commitment to economic justice and profit sharing. It would have been to embrace the idea that the democratic process, the having input on, again, conditions under which you live and work, is perhaps the more important thing here in a lot of ways. I spoke to one of the current members, and I asked him, with COVID and the difficulties that kind of presents to the company, what are his concern? Is it the financial challenges, or is it what it means for the Metis community and challenges to the Metis community? And he said to me, you might think I'm an idealist. He said, but if the community works, doesn't financial success follow? And which was a really interesting way to think about it, that a company that really has good democratic decision-making processes and structures will be successful, because there'll be that sense of real ownership, not just of the company, but of what the company is, of the decision-making process. And I think that's incredibly important.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder whether the other speakers have found that there has been an impact on the speed of decision making one way or another. I mean, it was definitely something we were concerned about going into it, that there would be some sort of slowing down of our ability to make decisions, particularly those bigger decisions. And I think I can probably comment on how that's gone. But I wondered whether that's been a challenge, a positive and negative, since you've become employee owned, whether it causes frustration.
I would say for us, in the normal course of events, we have this sort of rhythm and frequency of meetings, so it hasn't slowed down decisions. I think the challenge is we've got in the current environment, because everything is moving so incredibly quickly. It's just making sure, I've been the CEO, founder of a business for 20 years, when it was initially me and a few other people. We then developed a board, but you've now constantly got to remind yourself that governance is now very different, and you can't immediately implement things that you might have otherwise done. So I think it requires a bit more agility and sort of being a bit more nimble around the whole governance piece to make sure that you are going through due process. I mean, I'm mindful when we do our weekly partner huddle, I don't want to be mentioning stuff on that, and the trustees are sitting back thinking, "Oh, we didn't know that was going on in the business." So I think that's the challenge when you're in an environment like we are now, where things are just moving daily, weekly, as opposed to sort of monthly, quarterly. It's just making sure you've got sort of the right thinking and right mindset rather than process in place to make sure that everybody is being duly consulted. If you're going to talk about influence, what you don't want is to sort of espouse influence and then they don't feel that they've any influence to inform or help you make good decisions.
In those companies where I chair their trustee board, I would say that the current situation responding to COVID-19 has improved the communications because decisions have to be made so quickly. There's been a tendency to copy in trustee directors on key emails, keeping staff informed, keeping senior managers informed, rather than perhaps separating out the consultation as a separate step in the process. So I think the EOT model will come out of this pandemic more robust than it went into it. I think it is standing up to this rather severe test of good management.
Yeah, here at Optimax, in contrast to Matthias's situation, we had a board that was just me and my partner, 2 people, and now with our young professionals getting involved, we've got a board of about 10. And so, Barry, we're kind of going through we need to go through the same process you're going through, establishing, who's on the board, who's playing what role, what subcommittees do we have. That's something we're going to be working through later this year. And so, during this stressful period, we have had different team members just raise their hand and go, "Look, I'll take this ball, I got it." Like one person started a COVID task force, another person took the lead on making sure the manufacturing and production control was being handled. So we've had different people stepping up and running with it. And it's been really great to see people sort of taking the baton. Last fall, as we were coming into this, there was this sort of melee, like, we had meeting upon meeting where decisions weren't getting made because everybody was looking for consensus. And now with this crisis situation we have, people are just grabbing and running. And it's a beautiful thing to see these people develop and show what they're capable of.
We had I would be given almost anything to be a fly on the wall in a Metis Board of Trustees or Management Working Group meeting at this point, just to see how the dynamic works with COVID. We had we've been through different crises. Much of our work used to be building restaurants, and then there was a bit of a collapse of the restaurant bubble here in Seattle. And so that was a definite challenge, but there was a situation where people looked to the founder, to see, well, what are we going to do? How do we handle this crisis? And as I think it was Howard that said, sometimes maybe you have to kill the leader to actually, or the founder for something to really come to fruition. And I can't help but feel that, my leaving Metis is probably the moment when it truly becomes a more cooperative organization, and where that democratic part that I was talking about really comes into its own, because the founder's gone. They just left the room. And so what are we going to do?
Mm-hmm.
I think we are definitely in that position too. I mean, Guy, our founder, is quite a strong personality generally. I mean, he's fairly democratic and always has been, but there's then a natural inclination to think, well, is he going to be the ultimate decision maker in this room? Even though I've been the MD for a long time, but him stepping back more, I think, has been an important part of us liberating the real benefits of employee ownership. I mean, and it's credit to him that he's managed to do it in a way that hasn't got him frustrated with the business. But I think if he hadn't done that, and I've seen some other businesses on my travels where that definitely hasn't happened, and I would not want to be the MDs of those businesses. I think it's incredibly difficult to do your job if you are still in the shadow of a founder who is controlling. So I'm sure that wasn't you, but I think it is really difficult to kind of free up those benefits if the legacy continues in an excessively controng way.
Mm-hmm. It's hard to let go of your vision, and as the founder,
absolutely,
I mean, it's your baby in a way, right? But the for it to grow up and become everything it can be, just like being a parent, you have to let the kids move out give them the car keys. So.
Yeah. I wondered also with Rick on the sharing of the financial information, which we do on a fairly, fair. It's not a detailed level. We'll share our sort of financial performance monthly, but what we haven't done is any kind of training around that financial information, understanding it, understanding P&Ls, those sorts of things, which we sort of thought about when we were thinking about becoming employee owned would be an important part of the journey, and we just haven't really got round to it yet. Hasn't felt like the top thing in the priority list. But I just wonder whether alongside the sharing of that information, there has been a lot of investment in getting people to understand what those numbers mean, understand what their role is in influencing those numbers, so that they sort of live and breathe just beyond looking at a sort of spreadsheet of numbers that might be meaningless to a lot of people.
Yeah. Well, first of all, we bake it down to where it's only like 7 line items. It's not the whole, the whole business. So it's really kind of like top level stuff. So it's fairly simple to understand. But yeah, we've been doing it for almost 25 years now, sharing 25% of our profit each month. And in the early years, we did have our accountant spend time with the team explaining exactly what they're looking at. These days we have, as part of the onboarding process, HR will give people an overview of, what the financials are that they'll see each month. So it's not, completely foreign to them. And then they can ask their teammates. Everyone that gets hired here gets a mentor. And it's somebody from another area of the organization that can be impartial, they can go to and ask questions. And so that tends to help as well, whether it's about financials or corporate culture or whatever.
We've done something very similar, Rob, in terms of sharing financials since we became employee, and probably prior to that, in that we have a list of sort of 12 key metrics, I guess, across the financial metrics across the business, and then our FD, at the moment, we're doing that weekly because of COVID and keeping them up to date. But we invited all the team to go on a accounting for non-accountants course, which was a day in the office. Not everybody came, but certainly it was well represented, and people did enjoy that. So, that was a real deeper dive into our P&L and balance sheet and all that sort of stuff. So we definitely give them a financial overview, but they've really appreciated just the sort of level of honesty across, let's say, key metrics across the business. And now we've done that weekly whilst we've been in lockdown, and was just about to move to monthly because it becomes a bit too much if you're saying there's nothing really to report, which is where we're at the moment. So
I wonder if there's
sorry, Graham.
I wonder if there's a cultural difference between the US and the UK. Is there any sensitivity, for example, Barry, in revealing the deferred consideration payments as part of that those financial disclosures?
Yeah, we haven't disclosed the deferred consideration down to the individual's level. Obviously, anyone who's a deferred consideration holder knows what everyone else got, but certainly across the business. But one of the things that we've had to do as a result of COVID, because a proportion of our fees are linked to the stock market, and when the stock market was down 30%, that potentially had a very injurious impact on our business. So we had to put interventions in place, and one of those interventions was an impact on the deferred consideration payments. So we have given visibility to that. People are aware across the whole firm, keeping all these things in tension. We have, as a regulated business, we have capital adequacy to maintain. So when we report out, it is across all those levels. So I think people know sort of the aggregate sum that's involved, because we have put that into the public domain. Just what they don't know is what the individual breakdown is on that.
I think that Rick mentioned that wages, and kind of back to transparency, that wages are kind of worked out by a proposal of the individual to the group they work with. And I'm kind of curious whether that is then not, widespread knowledge. At Metis, we tried at one point to have wages posted, so it's totally transparent. And then also every year, the profit sharing is all part of the report that all the members see. And we ended up kind of taking a step back and not posting wages. If somebody wanted to see them, they could request and see the wages for the whole company. But but it really did undermine morale to have that easily accessible. And then the list of what, the account of what people received in profit sharing and the hours worked, that always did generate a lot of kind of disquiet, because there was a sense on the part of the people that worked a lot of hours that they were carrying the company. And then people that didn't get as much of a share would feel like the people that worked a lot of hours were milking it. And so there was a lot of funny undercurrents around that. And so I'm kind of curious how people handle transparency around individual compensations.
I mean, I can comment for us. I mean, I would say it's one of the great benefits of the trust that the profit share is equal for all. So I get the same as everybody else. Everybody else gets the same as everyone else. And I think in terms of a really important way of wrapping up what co-ownership is all about, that feels like it's a really important thing for our co-owners. If that didn't happen at that point in the year, which we've just about to do, being able to talk about that being about all of us. I can't remember who's share the wealth and with the team that creates the wealth, but share the wealth with the team that creates the wealth. I think that was you, Rick. Equally, is really, it's a really profound thing to be able to say to everyone. We all made the success of the business that year. We are sharing equally in that success. Is profoundly important. We don't share salaries, but we have a ratio of 1 to 9 between top and bottom. So within our legal structure and the REMCOM has a responsibility to play in that. Typically for a business of our size, that probably would be 1 to 20, something like that. So it's still, it's not equal pay. You might get in a co-op, but here, but it is significantly lower than it might be in a lot of businesses of our scale. And again, the principle behind that is still to say we're not going to reveal every salary, but the important thing is that there isn't a bunch of fat cats at the top earning a fortune in an employee-owned business, which would be fundamentally wrong. And there are some rules there that co-owners play a part in making sure is maintained. And so far we haven't, that's felt like enough. No one has ever asked me, and I've never heard of anyone say, look, there should be more transparency around this. It feels like the equality in the profit share and the clarity of those rules are enough to give the reassurance needed that what we are doing is different to what you would find in most businesses, and that the equality that you probably should find in an employee-owned business is being upheld and maintained.
Yes, I'd echo that comment. There doesn't seem to be the demand among UK employees to know what their colleagues are being paid, but there is a demand for fairness and reasonableness. And so perhaps pay bands are disclosed so you know that anyone who's at a particular level in an organization will be getting a certain amount.
Sorry, Graham. I was going to say, you go ahead.
No, you carry on. I was actually going to move on to a new point.
Okay, I was just going to say, Matthias, to your point about how you encourage people to, you mentioned in your organization that there was a bit of disquiet when certain people were being rewarded in different ways or seeing the financial data. I guess that's the challenge, I guess, you've got when you move to a structure like this. And it reminds me a bit like, we call our team partners, and we work a lot with lawyers. And equally, you'll get in any 1 year a lawyer in one particular department doing incredibly well, but they therefore support another partner that hasn't perhaps done so well. And I guess that's the culture that we're trying to encourage across the business, that it is a sort of all for one and one for all. And there'll be times when somebody has to absolutely bust a gut to get some work done, and then you just hope a couple of months later that their colleagues will do likewise. So it's a sort of cultural model that we're trying to encourage, where there is that sense of we're all partners together, and therefore you do all need to sort of try and pull in the right direction, but not necessarily looking at on a weekly or monthly basis. But you hope in aggregate that everybody gets that sort of vision and that sense of this is something we're all building. But yeah, it is a challenge.
That reference to partnership ties in nicely to the discussion we had about how financial reward is delivered to employees. In the UK, essentially, it's a partnership approach in which there is an annual bonus, or perhaps a more regular bonus, and that goes out to all employees on same terms, rather than a share incentive based arrangement, which necessarily means different people getting different rewards at different times as they leave the company and sell shares. And essentially, you've only got the one pot of money, unless you're going to sell to a third party. it's surplus profits that would have to be used to buy shares from somebody who left. And so the UK approach is to emphasize distributing that annually to everyone as a profit share, rather than, say, setting some aside to provide a fund to buy shares from employees when they leave.
Yeah, if I can respond to Matthias's question. Our bonus plan that we have is a 5-year buy-in. So our belief is for the first 5 years, people are learning quite a lot. But by the time they've been here 5 years, they're like one of the core members. So everybody that's been here 5 years and beyond and making $50,000 or more is getting exactly the same slice of the bonus pie. So the differentiator is the salary that people get paid. And that's really based on market data that comes from the Chamber of Commerce or from industry information. So it's through the years, I've always felt it puts a big burden on the managers to figure out what each person's worth. So I really like letting the employee decide, how much they should be making, and then pitching that to their colleagues. And if everybody agrees that, then that's what they make. And it's got to be rational. Otherwise, the colleagues are going to say, no, you're full of it, And it also opens up a dialogue for, well, if you're making 50,000, you want to make 75, here are 3 or 4 things you might want to start learning or doing. And the thing I really like about it, the thing that's so powerful about that process, is it takes away the me versus the man attitude that some people have, because now you're earning whatever you think is fair and that you've convinced your colleagues is fair.
Yeah, that's not a feature in the UK, but I'd like to think that there was openness, and so if anyone felt they were being underpaid as an employee owner, that they would have the freedom to say something about it to somebody who mattered.
To be clear, that's not something that's common in the US either.
I just wondered how, and it sounds like actually all of the businesses have shared an underpinning of a strong set of values, and quite a lot that was shared there about investment in people, whether that's training and development or advancing their careers. But how important linked to employee ownership has been the investment and all the other things that make being an employee owner real, so that something has to feel like it's changed. And from our perspective, that was the view that we took, that this can't be just an ownership thing that ticks one thing on the list, which prevents the thing getting into the wrong hands, but it doesn't deliver all the value that you want to have an employee owned business through the people. And to do that, you can hang it on the hook, but there's a whole bunch of other stuff that needs to happen around training, development, pay, leadership, management, communication, profit shares, all those other things, which, really we did the hard work with the legals. We paid Graham to do that. And then we spent so much of our time doing all the other stuff to try to make employee ownership matter and deliver business benefit. And I just wonder whether that's something in the journeys with the other businesses, whether that's something you had to do, or whether that's something that was so sort of ingrained in what you were doing already that employee ownership has just felt like a kind of natural succession on top of those things.
I would say for us, we sort of operated on a very collegiate basis anyway. So there was a huge level of participation. So in some respects, there wasn't a change. But the thing I mentioned about think like a partner, I don't think genuinely people tended to operate with that owner partner mentality. And that's why I think the couple of things I mentioned around information exchange is really important. So they have a much greater awareness across the business. So I've always believed that there's no such thing as being sort of over communicating, but we've really gone to town on making sure that people do have the information that they need. So I think being a partner, it's about whether they think like a partner. So in a sense, you can give them a load of stuff, but then the second bit, the second bit is reward. So I think in terms of compensating them, that's an important part of the jigsaw. But then I think the third one around influence is really important as well. So making sure that they genuinely feel that they're playing a part in running the business. So, and that's what we're focusing on. So I would say those three, and then they all ultimately potentially lead to behavioral change. So, we could produce a manual of what it looks like to be a a partner or a co-owner, as you call them, Rob, in your business. But essentially, if you're not giving them information and you're not giving them influence, and if we were to do a survey in 12 months' time and speak to the partners and say, do you genuinely feel like you're an owner? And they would go, no, not really. I fill in a few surveys, but frankly, nothing happens around here that was different before. For me, that wouldn't be a success. We might have dealt with this sort of the legal transition, but actually getting them to wake up every day and think like a partner, have that mentality of owning decisions, getting more involved, working with the trustees is a really key part of what we're trying to do.
That fostering a culture of ownership is a real challenge. I think much more of a challenge than I anticipated. And what we did is initially, when we converted, there were just under 40 people. We wanted to have a critical mass of employee, member owners. And so 16 people were part of that first wave of member owners. And of those, a number of them had, there was basically anybody that had been with the company for a year or more. And for some of them, I don't think the ownership really meant that much, because they hadn't been there that long. It was just, oh, I'm an owner. Okay, fine. But the way it works now is that you have to be there for 5 years or 8,000 hours, or you have to be considered a key personnel, and then your membership can be expedited if 75% of the other member owners vote for that. And that can happen after 2 years. And so the people that have come on as members more recently, I think, have much more of a sense of that kind of culture of ownership, because there's that sense they went through this process, they really had to earn it. And I think that has been really valuable to Metis, and just to that process of developing that culture of ownership.
I can tell you, for us, we surveyed our employees through the years, and every time we ask if they would like cash or ownership, they always choose the cash. So we've really focused on making sure that we create a succession plan where we continue to share the profit with the employees, and we continue this self-management culture, so that it's more of an organic leadership culture, where people, we have a lot of people here that are very independent thinkers, and top-down leadership, it kind of crushes people's spirits. But the way we do this organic leadership, people that have ideas, they can put forth their ideas, and if they get support from their team members, it moves forward. If they don't, then it kind of dies on the vine. And that seems to work out really well, and it fosters a ton of innovation, like way beyond anything that that we could do when we were earlier in the business. We were top-down leadership, and at that point, you're only growing by the influence of the leadership team and their sphere of influence, and it just isn't as effective as the entire organization looking for solutions.
Yeah, that completely resonates with us. I mean, I think we were getting into a place where, you probably had 500-600 members of staff in our world. It's pretty competitive online groceries, and you were getting to a point where we thought we are not going to survive unless we can devolve the decision making and the innovation and the progress of the business through the business in a way that we hadn't done before. Like you, we were very fairly autocratic, really pretty top down, and we have had to, in the same way, I think probably the most important thing in terms of culture has been investment in our managers. The vast majority have made the grade, not all of them, and we've invested a lot in coaching and leadership, which we started with the directors. So we started with me and Guy and the whole senior teams. Look, if you're not on board with this, then you don't get it, because part of the problem lies with us. If we think we've got a management culture issue, it being too top down, we've got to get a grip of this ourselves before we start advocating this as a different approach for everyone. Thankfully, everyone took that on board very seriously. I mean, we've now basically run that, and this has taken us 2 years since we've been employee owned. We're still not finished, but we've been running that program of culture and management and leadership and behaviors, which are the things sitting behind me here, for the last 2 years, to over 100 of our managers. And ultimately that's the thing that I think is most profound, because that more listening, more engaging, being there as a manager to serve the people that work in your team, knowing that they are the likely people to have the best answers for how something should be done differently, has been really new to us, and has gone hand in hand with employee ownership, because we thought it was the right thing to do. But I think that's, if anything has been influential in employee ownership in terms of our success in the last couple of years, it's that we're starting to get this momentum in the ideas coming from everyone and not coming from a few, and we're starting to get over that sort of mindset of people waiting for someone else to make a decision for them, and starting to think, well, I own this business, so it's not down to me to wait for my manager to tell me what to do. I can take some responsibility for doing that myself. And it's not, we're still on that journey, I think, but that I think is probably the most positive development since we've started all of this, and the thing that I hope will really stand us in good stead in the future.
Very good.
How are we doing, Chris? Have you got your extra 10 minutes?
And then some. I'm now sitting here thinking, damn it, this conversation has been so fantastic. I'm really going to have problems now in terms of sort of, was it a shoehorning it into an hour? I'll figure out something good or clever, I hope, with luck, to get this all across to the audience. This is just wonderful.
Presumably this is bonus material. They can click on a link to.
Right, on the DVD release, this will be bonus track. That's right. And as an employee, I'm sure Graham is feeling the same as me. As an employee ownership zealots, my heart is kind of soaring right now, just listening to all of this. So really wonderful, really wonderful. And I think that our group of 150 or so, certainly odd employee ownership scholars, also zealots, will really enjoy this so much. And as I don't know if we shared in the email thread, that this is the first, we always had, this has been running this series twice a year for over 10 years. And we always have ESOP company panels and equity comp, direct share ownership panels, but this was our first EOT company panel. So in the microcosm of the Rutgers Fellowship group, it's a big deal. So super excited that we could all be here for this.
And I hope that the audience gets out of this that one can achieve tremendous employee engagement, without necessarily involving a share plan. That the employee trust allows you to put together a really easy to administer ownership structure that essentially allows the business to get on with the employee engagement element, gets on with running an employee-owned company without having to keep an eye on the share price or monitoring an internal market or going through all sorts of regulations. You can get on with running a successful business.
Yeah. Thank you very much, guys. This is really wonderful. It's great to meet everybody.
Likewise,
Yep.
yeah.
No,
If you're ever in Devon, anyone, then pop in, and hopefully we might have a restaurant open by then, but who knows.
Great.
So thank you, Barry. Thank you, Rob. Much appreciated.
Thanks all. Nice to meet you.
Lovely
all.
to meet you, Rick.
Bye.
Nice to meet you.
Cheers.
Bye, guys.
So nice to meet
Cheers,
you.
guys.
Thanks.
And good to catch up, Chris.
Great seeing you, Graham.
Cheers. Bye.
Hello, I'd like to give you an update on the John Lewis partnership case that Dick Hoffman and I wrote. John Lewis Partnership is the oldest and the largest of the employee-owned trust. Let me give you a brief history of it. John Lewis founded the company in the 1800s. His son, Eden Lewis, turned the organization around in the 1920s. Beginning in 1918, they published the Gazette. The Gazette was published for two reasons. One, to provide information, but it also was published to collect ideas from the employees and distribute those ideas to other employees. In 1925, they paid the first bonuses. In 1928, they changed the governance of the organization to a democratic governance. In 1929, the first trust settlement was signed, giving the employees a substantial ownership in the firm. in 1950, the second trust was signed, which turned over the complete ownership into a perpetual trust for all employees for all times. Why did John Lewis do this? Excuse me, why did Spaden Lewis do this? Spaden, when he joined the company, found out that he, his brother, and his father took home more money than all the other employees did collectively each month. He didn't think this was fair. He also saw that this was detrimental to the organization. So what he did was he put this trust so the employees could not only own the company and govern the company, but contribute to the company. He also saw that intuitively the damage that wage and wealth gaps had on businesses. So he's wanted a fairer form of capitalism, a better way of doing business. And he wanted the rights of ownership, profit, knowledge, and power for all employees on the first day they join the business. Now, why this isn't better known, why this company is not better known, is a mystery to me. It has over 80,000 employees. It has survived the Great Depression, World War II, and many other recessions. It has performed very well. Its announcement each year of the yearly bonus is covered by the national press in the UK. Our purpose in running the case was not only to just talk about John Lewis, but to educate people about John Lewis, especially students. But we'd like to educate others. The John Lewis organization has a constitution. How many other organizations have a constitution? They have made, in this constitution, there are 7 governing principles. They have remained largely unchanged. Mostly they've updated the wording. The wording in the original constitution is quite old by modern standards. So they've updated the wording and they've shortened the constitution so that people are more likely to read it. The first principle is the primary principle of the organization. It's their guiding star. In Star Trek vocabulary, it would be called the Prime Directive. And it states, the partnership's ultimate purpose is the happiness of all its members and through their worthwhile and satisfying employment in a successful business. Spaden recognized that the happiness of all employees is intertwined with a successful business and vice versa. Obviously, much can be learned from studying John Lewis. My co-author and I learned much. I hope you will learn much from it too.